In this video, we are going to talk about Holy Paladins. Let's start by talking about how to gear your Holy Paladin. Let's start by taking a look at stats and reforging. As you can see from the stats equation, intellect is the most important stat, followed by haste and spirit. Let's look at reforging. When reforging, you will have two objectives. First, you will want to improve your mana regeneration by increasing your spirit. On any gear without spirit, reforge mastery first and crit second into spirit. Your next objective will be to maximize haste. Reforge mastery first and crit second into haste. Let's take a look at some of the more useful gems that you can use to socket your gear as a Holy Paladin. You can see a couple of lists on the screen right now of the different relevant gems. There is one thing that I want to mention, and that's as a rule of thumb, you should fill yellow sockets with Brilliant Inferno rubies unless the socket bonus is plus 20 intellect. Alternatively, you can fill yellow sockets with a Purified Demon's Eye too. Either way is fine. Meta sockets are almost always worth matching unless, in the case of a Holy Paladin, the socket bonus there is, like say, plus 30 mastery. Let's move on to Holy Paladin glyphs. You can see on the screen right now there's a couple of lists. One list is for effective prime glyphs, and the other is a list for effective major glyphs. Let's spend just a moment reviewing the very important prime glyphs. There are four of them that are the most powerful for a Holy Paladin. One is Glyph of Insight, the other is Glyph of Word of Glory, next is Glyph of Holy Shock, and last is the Glyph of Divine Favor. Now, you'll have to sacrifice one of these. I was in the position where I had to decide between the Glyph of Word of Glory or the Glyph of Divine Favor. I went with Word of Glory just because the way that I play, I typically will use Word of Glory more often, so I gain more benefit from this glyph. Divine Favor is a spell that you use in emergency situations. As you can see from the tooltip, it has a 3-minute cooldown, making it obviously like an emergency ability. So that's why I went with the Glyph of Word of Glory for the prime glyphs. The Glyph of Holy Shock is nice to have because it actually increases the frequency of your Infusion of Light procs, which is nice. Now let's take a look at some of the more effective major glyphs. You can see a list on the screen right now. There are 5. There's Light of Dawn, Divine Protection, Divinity, Beacon of Light, and Divine Plea. Let's look at the 3 major glyphs I chose. I went with the Glyph of Divine Plea because the additional 6% is actually pretty big, and it's nice to be able to cast Divine Plea in between pulls so that you don't have to sit there and drink and hold the party back. I also went with the Glyph of Beacon of Light. It makes Beacon of Light free of mana, which is nice. And I also went with Glyph of Light of Dawn, and it's nice to have that heal affect more than one additional target. That's why I went with those. Let's move on to some of the more interesting Holy Paladin talents. As with the other discussions in the other videos, we're not going to talk about every individual talent in gross detail. Instead, we'll just focus on some of the more important talents. Let's begin by looking at a couple of talents that have the property of healing you. One of them is Protector of the Innocent. Anytime you cast a targeted heal on any target except yourself, it also heals you for a small amount. The other talent is Enlightened Judgments. What this does, one of the things that it does is anytime you cast Judgment, it also heals you for a small amount. So you can see that Enlightened Judgments sort of incentivizes keeping Judgment on cooldown. Let's take a look at a couple of the more important proccing talents. Those 2 talents are Infusion of Light and Daybreak. Let's look at Infusion of Light and how it works. Whenever your Holy Shock crits, it creates the Infusion of Light buff that reduces the cast time of your next Flash of Light, Holy Light, or Divine Light spells. So typically the way that I'll use this in a dungeon is whenever Infusion of Light procs, I'll try to take advantage of it and cast Divine Light when that occurs. Let's look at Daybreak. The way it works is you'll periodically, when you're casting your Holy Light or Divine Light or Flash of Light spells, it'll create this Daybreak proc that causes your next Holy Shock to not trigger a cooldown. The consequence of this is that you'll basically have 2 Holy Shocks that you can use, which is nice. It's also worth noting that when Daybreak procs, it doesn't reset the cooldown of Holy Shock right away. It only affects Holy Shock, the next Holy Shock after it comes off cooldown. So you have to keep that in mind. Last Word gives your Word of Glory spell an increased 60% critical strike chance on targets that are dying. That is, targets that have 35% health or less. So this really, if your target is nearly dead, make sure that you keep this talent in mind. Let's take a look at Divine Favor. Divine Favor is sort of an emergency ability that you can use in a critical situation. If, for example, say you're in a dungeon and everyone is taking heavy damage, that's a good time to go ahead and pop Divine Favor so that you have that increased haste and critical strike chance. Okay, the Beacon of Light talent is going to require a little bit of discussion. Generally, when you're in a dungeon, you'll want to cast Beacon of Light on the tank. Now, the way it works is anytime you cast a heal on a party member other than the tank, it will also heal the tank for 50% of the amount healed, unless you're using Holy Light. If you cast Holy Light on a party member other than the tank, it'll also heal the tank for the full amount of the Holy Light heal. So say, for example, you put Beacon of Light on the tank and then you cast Holy Light on one of the DPS party members. It'll heal both of them for the same amount. So as you can see, this talent actually encourages you to spam Holy Light on party members other than the tank. So it has a really unusual kind of mechanic to it. For this reason, it's generally a good idea to never cast Holy Light on the tank, because if you cast Holy Light on the tank, you're only getting the benefit of 1 Holy Light. If you cast Holy Light on someone other than the tank, you get the benefit of 2 Holy Light heals. So if I'm in a dungeon, for example, and I want to heal the tank, I will deliberately target someone else and start casting Holy Light on them so that I get the benefit of 2 Holy Light heals. Speed of Light is a nice spell to have. What it does is it actually it dramatically reduces the cooldown of your Holy Radiance spell, which is a great AoE heal that Pallies have, but it also creates the benefit of whenever you cast Holy Radiance, it increases your movement speed by 60% for 4 seconds. So that's a nice little perk to have on the Holy Radiance spell. Sacred Cleansing is nice to have because if you religiously cleanse like I do in dungeons, it also creates a benefit of removing 1 magic effect. Conviction is a good example of a talent that rewards your critical heals. Each time you land a critical heal, it'll give you 1 stack of the Conviction buff that increases your bonus healing by 3% per stack. So the more you crit, the more Conviction stacks you'll have. Okay, now that we have covered the basic Holy Paladin talents, in the next section we're going to talk about some miscellaneous tips, strategies, and best practices for healing as a Holy Paladin.